We are speaking with the one and only Mike Score of the Flock of Seagulls, and to me, just an absolute thrill because you can't have grown up going through the '80s and not been affected by the Flock of Seagulls. Mike, as we say in Montreal, bonjour, but thank you for those memories because we remember the hair, we remember the song, we remember the video. You were it, man. You were it.
It was good for a while. Yeah. I had the hair, we had the videos, we had the look, and
Yeah.
amazingly, it's still going on, so it's happy days.
Let me just, before we get into String Theory, the latest album, let me just quickly ask you, how important was video to the band? If MTV hadn't existed, could I Ran and the rest of it gone through radio and had the same impact, or was it really the visual and MTV and the other, how important was that?
Well, looking back at that time,
yeah,
before we ever got a deal or anything like that, we kind of realized how important visuals were, and we were a very visual band, and that was the idea. We were trying to be David Bowie, we were trying to be Alice Cooper, we were trying to be anyone that looked new and new wavy, So I think the advent of MTV happened for us absolutely perfect. And it's like, when they say when all the dominoes hit one after the other, that was our career. It was, we'd get to one point and we're like, what's going to happen next? Something would happen, like MTV. Suddenly, boom, we'd be up to the next level. And then, touring with the Police, that was the next level. And
wow.
Everything just fell into place. It was just the weirdest time, because when you first start out, you get your record deal, you think you're going to be huge, and then you go, oh, how does this happen? And it happens by magic, obviously. So
yeah,
we're quite happy.
It's interesting that you mentioned opening for the Police, because I'm going to run this in the week that I'm running my Miles Copeland interview, who of course managed the Police. So you must have known Miles.
Yeah, we didn't know him well. We got to know the band quite well, but Miles was a manager and he wasn't always around. So we did get to know him, but we were kind of don't interfere with these people, you know what I mean?
When stay out of the way.
Yeah. So there was quite a bit of that going on, and we were just happy to be on tour. We didn't really need to know anyone that well, especially other people's managers and stuff like that. But everything on those tours was so well set up, that you came in, you did your thing, you left, and you didn't have a lot of downtime to get to know that many people, and you had your own 30 crew anyway, so
oh. Maybe I'll run your show before Miles, and you get to open for the Police again. Maybe I'll do that. But let's talk about the new album, String Theory. I mean, you put out Ascension in 2018, and you worked some of your greatest hits with the symphony orchestra and made them big and beautiful. Is String Theory just more of that? Is it different? What is String Theory?
String Theory is like basically a continuation, but I think it actually sounds better than Ascension. Some of it is just songs that I did, and the rest of the band weren't involved. But I think Say You Love Me, which is the first video and the first release from it, to me, that is where everything was going at the time. When the band actually split up, that was where things were going. And I think, like I said, I think it's a better step forward as far as music goes than to what we were doing. You got to think back to that when we started, none of us could play anything. So a lot of things that happened were almost luck. It's like, oh, that was a great mistake. You know what I mean? So let's keep that in. By the time we got to Say You Love Me and all that, I knew how to write songs, and I wanted to move in that direction. And I ended up moving in that direction on my own. So to me, to hear these songs now done as orchestral units, if you like, is for me, it's much more pleasing than the old stuff, I mean, Say You Love Me was not released on a big label, so it's still new, and I think it's going to be quite interesting to see what people think of it, especially with the orchestra. And I just saw the video myself yesterday, and I thought it was great. So, you know, we're still on the roll. The name of the band and everything's still on a roll.
Talk to me about the arrangements for an orchestral. Do you approach it the same way that you approached doing Iran and Modern Love is Automatic and the old stuff, or is it a whole new mindset?
It's in a way it's different because, you know, these songs I never expected to put them to the orchestra. So I was in my studio, I mean, during lockdown, obviously. And, you know, we had a orchestral arranger come to my studio, and we sat there and we talked about the songs. And because it was just me and him, we had a completely different kind of tangent of nobody else interfering with what we wanted. You know, it wasn't everybody's throwing ideas in. It was just me and him, and I would say, well, could we do a bit of this there? And he'd score it all out right in front of me, you know, and then he'd play it on a little keyboard, and we'd go, yeah, that would sound great, stuff like that. And then he went away and made it work with the song, because some of the things I wanted were, I don't know, maybe a bit too outlandish or wouldn't quite fit in musically, technically, note-wise, because I don't read music or anything like that. I just go with what sounds good to me. So he tamed it, if you want, and made it fit, made it feel more orchestral. And when I heard it back, I'm like, wow, yeah, you know, thank God it wasn't just me playing the orchestra stuff on a synth, you know, it's somebody that really knew orchestra stuff.
When you look at Ascension and the new one, you are taking songs like Space Age Love Song and Iran and the other ones, and you're giving them that orchestral thing. Have you thought of making just a purely orchestral album of just new music that you created just for the orchestra?
That might be interesting, but because I'm not, you know, I don't read music. I don't even call myself a musician, really. It's something I, you know, like to have a go at, maybe, but I'm not orchestra minded. I'm synthesizer minded. I'm beat minded, you know, I'm lyric driven and stuff like that. And I like to keep everything simple, because if it gets to the point where you have to think about playing rather than the whole song, then I just lose it and I go on to something else. So it would be, I mean, I would, if I could stand in front of an orchestra and go, hey, violins, can you play this? And, you know, kind of conducting, but by shouting, if you want, not instead of waving your arms around and going, you do this. So that might be interesting, but it might be fun, but I don't even know if I could attempt it.
Well, it could be interesting. The first Flock of Seagull album comes out in 1982. We're almost at 40 years. Do you have any kind of plans in 2022 to celebrate it in some way, shape, or form?
There's plans being bandied around. You know, we may go out and do that first album in its entirety.
That'd be great.
On tours. But the thing is, you know, I'm touring all the time, and I play the songs that I like to play.
Right.
So to actually to go back 40 years to when that was all you could play because it was all you had. Again, it might be an interesting thing, and I'm sure that that fans would like it, but it may also be something that restricts you to
Right.
that era, you know. And 40 years, I kind of think I'm only 21 myself, so how can I be playing stuff that's, you know, that I wrote 40 years ago?
But by the way, it's amazing that it's had this staying power. First of all, what do you thank that on? Like, why do you think it's lasted so long? And obviously you couldn't have thought in 1982 you'll be doing interviews in 2022 talking about this, but why was this music just so special? How has it endured?
Looking back, I think we created an atmosphere that no one else had created. I think in a way we kicked off something that was brand new. It was, you know, new wave was starting to happen, but we didn't think ourselves new wave. We just thought ourselves as seagulls, you know, and we created our own little bubble. and that bubble never got burst. No, people have tried to be like us, and they've tried to be spacey and stuff like that. But I think a lot of that comes from because we couldn't play, and we created this whole scene of how we did things. No one's been able to recreate it, so it left us on our own. And people that like that stay with it because they're like, oh, I can hear bits of it in this other band and bits of it there, and bits of other bands in them, but nothing else quite sounds like them. And hang on,
Yeah.
got somebody knocking on my door here because I'm just in a hotel in Las Vegas.
Wait a minute, that's a Men at Work song. Who can it be knocking on my door?
Yeah.
Well, we'll break into that later.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that's what happened, and people grew up with it,
right?
And and because they grew up with it, it's ingrained in them, and they just keep an eye out for, oh, that's the Seagulls, that's a Flock of Seagulls. I kind of did that with some bands, I mean, I was a big Beatles fan when I was a kid, and I'm still a big Beatles fan.
Yep.
So once you get that in your brain, it's always, when your ears always pick up, it just stays in there.
And those memories come back. Hey, let me ask you this, and folks that have listened to my show over the years, I tell this story often. I had this talk once with a Doug Feger of the Knack, and I said, boy, Doug, you wrote My Sharona, it's the greatest thing ever. And he said, he goes, Mitch, let me stop you. Yes, it was the greatest thing ever, but Mitch, it was a golden albatross. And he says, and I go, what do you mean? He goes, you don't understand. I've got the car, the pool, the house, and everybody loves My Sharona. We know that. But as a musician, it was very frustrating because every time I went to the record company with new music, they would say, we don't hear another My Sharona, go try again. Did you, with Iran and Space Age Love Song and some of your big hits, encounter that with the radio, or not the radio company, but the record company that would come and say, that's really nice, Mike, but where's Iran Part 2?
Up to a point you get that because record companies want hits, but I would never really felt pressured to try and rewrite Iran. I mean, I rewrote Space Age with The More You Live, but I did that because I hadn't quite finished Space Age, if you know what I mean. I liked that, the sound of it and the atmosphere, and I recreated that on The More You Live. But Iran, no, I never really felt any pressure. I mean, there was pressure to write another hit, not to rewrite Iran. I do remember the record company saying it would be nice to have another hit like Iran, which maybe was a hint. But I'm not.
Wink, wink, Mike.
Yeah, I'm not that kind of writer. I just wake up in the morning, and if I pick up something, it could be a country song, I'll write that day. I never sit down and go, I'm going to write a song. They just happen. They just fall on me from great height, So as we say, it's a chocolate box. It's Montelemar today and marzipan tomorrow. So that's, to me, that's the interesting part of writing songs, not just repeating and repeating. Yeah.
Though AC/DC might argue with you.
Yeah.
The Flocks, so the Flock of Seagull, are currently working on not one but 2 new albums, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I'm in the studio right now. I'm just taking a break because we're doing some shows now that lockdown is over. We're out doing shows again, which is great. That's why you're in a band, is to go play shows and stuff like that. But I'm in the studio. I'm doing an album which is a spacey album, and that's called Space Boy. It's the story of Space Boy who comes to Earth and doesn't particularly like it. So I'm writing songs for that, and I've got about 5 or 6 for that. And then I've got a bunch of songs which are very Seagullsy. So I'm going to put out a new Flock of Seagulls album.
Right.
And hopefully that will be out, I would say, by the end of the year or early next year. And it's obviously, I'm going to say it sounds fantastic, but everyone,
of course it does.
Everyone that hears it is like, wow, this is going to be great. So
well, let me hear it, and I'll tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
So okay, let me just dig into that for a second, because you put out Zebrata in 2014 under your own name.
Yeah.
Now this one's going to go out under Flock of Seagulls. So does this mean that we're sort of capturing the essence of the band and going back to those sounds and that moment and giving us sort of that classic Seagull sound, or is it just a
No, it's definitely Seagull sounding. There's definitely some of the 80s Seagulls in there, and that's why I decided it should be a Seagulls album, not just a Mike Score album. The Vibrato was just, I woke up one day strange and I just went, I'm gonna make an album. And then I started, and I just picked up the songs that sounded good to me on that day, that week or whatever, and made them. And I really liked what happened on that. But this album is I've written 300 or 400 songs in my time, and I kind of went along and went, that one, and listen to those two, and another, that one, and these will all sound like a flock of seagulls, and like we say, 40 years, maybe it's time.
Yeah, it is. By the way, with the 300-400 songs you've written, do you own your own catalog, or who's sort of in charge of that?
Well, we are just getting our original catalog back.
Oh wow!
But all these new songs since about 86, I own them all. Yeah, they're all mine.
Oh well, hey.
So hopefully one day I can sell them.
Well, hey, listen, I actually know people who buy them, so maybe we'll have an off-camera conversation. So where does the band go from here in terms of moving forward? Do you just go out and tour and play the hits and put out this new music? Do you have a farewell tour plan? What's sort of like, where's the period at the end of the sentence?
I go out on tour. We play the songs we like. We're gonna obviously, when this new album comes out, we'll tour that. There's the possibility of, like I say, of doing the first album as a tour. As far as farewell, you'll have to kick me off the stage and drag me off by screaming. I'll still have the mic and be yelling Iran and stuff like that. I don't intend to stop because I enjoy it so much. And as long as, people like it, why stop? I mean, who wants to stop and go, I used to be, the thing is, I think if you're in a band like this and it's your life, and it's to the end of your life, which hopefully will be another 50 years,
Yeah, I'm
come
hoping.
back and say, oh, it's your 90th anniversary, and I'll go, yeah.
Oh, I mean, who was it that was out there that long? Like BB King and Chuck Berry, they pushed it,
Yeah, I mean, it's there's no other feeling like going on stage, and actually getting it right. There's no other feeling like getting it wrong sometimes on stage. And hanging out with your buddies and being backstage and meeting people and talking about music. And, a lot of people want to know, how did you write Wishing, and what's it about? And having these little conversations, that's life to me, life and traveling around. I'd rather be traveling around in a van, going to gigs and enjoying that than sitting at home watching the NFL or something, So,
well, we sit and watch the NHL in Canada. Let me ask you, just since you mentioned songwriting, I had a conversation with Jim Valance the other day, and he always said, you got to have a title first, because that's the word that, that's what people are going to remember when they sing it or whatever. How do you approach it? Is it, you're sitting there on the keyboard going blah, 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 and, ooh, that's a song? Or is it like, ooh, I've got this nice little sort of poem, and let me put some music to it? How do you approach it?
It changes, but generally speaking, I'll be, let's say I go and start messing around on on my computer and stuff like that, and I'll play something and I'll be thinking about something, and either it'll fit together or it won't. And if it doesn't, then I go off and do something else. If it does, I generally spend all day just messing around. I never sit there and go, oh, now I can put an A minor in there. That will sound great. I just go like this on the keyboard, basically, and things. That's
kind of how I play too. Oh.
And then I get an idea for lyrics, and right. I just throw it down. And if the song wants to, it will write itself. I don't write songs. Songs write themselves, and they come to me out of nowhere. And I'm just lucky enough that to be able to catch them.
Yeah. Let me ask you just, and I'll end on this in terms of the sound of the band in the early days. You know, that you were really pushing the technology. Yes, we had bands like Emerson, Lake, and Palmer and stuff doing the keyboard stuff, but you went in a different direction. How did you choose to do that rather than just bass guitar, drums, you know, four on the floor, classic? Talk to me about the technology and saying, "Yep, we're gonna push this and be different."
I don't think we knew we were really pushing it. You know, like I said, we couldn't play.
But you invented a new sound. I mean, it really was a new sound.
I'm a synth player because I couldn't play a guitar, you know, and synths were monophonic back then. So I just had to use one finger, but I could turn a knob and go, "Ooh, that sounds really cool." And then, you know, we would say stuff like, "Well, I'm just going to hold this note, Paul, and that's kind of boring. So can you just kind of jangle along on your guitar, but don't get in the way of me trying to sing this?" So over 6 months or so, that's our technique that we developed. And, you know, and my brother playing drums, it was just like, "Ali, just keep them drums going." You know, he wasn't going to be a fancy drummer. That wasn't in at the time. Right. You know, in vogue at the time was like dance beats. So just keep that beat, you know. Let's get some synthesizer sounding drums, and all that technology was just arriving then. So we were like grabbing it to fill holes in our songs. And, you know, when you got a band like us that rehearsed 8 hours a night, every night for, I don't know, 6 months, maybe even longer, where, like I say, we created our own bubble, and that sound was in the bubble. And we'd go hear other bands and go, "They don't have that sound. They're not in our bubble," you know. So
they were jangling the wrong stuff.
Yeah. So that bubble we took with us wherever we went, and people were like, "Wow, I've never seen or heard a bubble like that before." And we saw some great bands, you know, and we wanted to emulate them, but we couldn't because we couldn't play. Like we saw Simple Minds, and we saw
Jim Kerr, man, what a talent.
Yeah, stuff like that. But we were like, "Well, isn't that amazing? We can't do that."
So let me get this straight. That you put the songs together like this: I'll push this button, you jangle that, you do the dance beats. Was that the creative process? I'll button, you jangle, you dance beat.
Button, jangle, follow, beat, and then I'll try and throw some lyrics in as well.
The secret to the success. That's terrific. My fans always like the gear talk. So what was the keyboards back then? What was the setup for you back then?
Keyboard wise, when we first started out, I had a Korg MS-10, which was the basically one of the cheapest synths you could get. And I had 2 pedals called Clone Theories. And I put it out of the MS-10 into the first Clone Theory and into the second one. And that made the synth sound come alive, you know, the chorusing and the way those pedals worked. It gave it a lot of bite and a lot of growl, but also power. And that actually created a platform for the guitar to sit on top of. So it didn't have to be too fancy because it was a very gripping kind of thick sound, you know. And then we used Simmons drums a lot because
everybody did back then.
Yeah, because you didn't have to tune them, you know. It was a knob. Tuned it with a knob, not like, "Oh my God, what's it going to sound like?" Basically standard bass guitar, but with a couple of effects. And gear wise, Paul used a Kramer guitar that was an alloy neck and all that, which and he used a penny for a pick, which gave it a metallic kind of edge. 2 JC 120s, which people know what they are, obviously. Yeah. And 2 Roland, I think they were 201 echo units. That's how we got that spread echo thing. Let's see, what else? The second keyboard I got was a Korg Delta, which is when I first discovered chords. And I'm like, I need something that plays chords. And I got a Delta, which, because I loved, Korgs had a sound, they had a filter sound, which was just like anything else I played didn't have that sound. So I was a real Korg fan.
Well, here, let me ask you this. When the first big check rolls in and you get to buy that piece of gear you always want, what was that piece of gear that you went out and said, yeah, now I got the money, I'm buying this? What was that piece where you just went, yeah, I can buy this now?
I actually bought a Jupiter 8, which
yeah,
God knows, absolutely fantastic synth. I wanted to get a Jupiter 4, but the Jupiter 8 came out right as I had the money to buy something. So I went completely over the top and got the Jupiter 8. If I'd have really had the money, I would have bought a PPG. And you would have lost me forever in that because it was so complicated. So it was quite good that Jupiter 8 is not a really complex synth. It's fairly simple. It had presets, which obviously, once you get that sound, you never want to lose it. Whereas on like an MS-10, every second of the day and night you're using it, you're turning a knob just to get that. Is it exactly the same? Is it? And then all of a sudden, since we're more than synths, they did everything. So it's like now I use a Roland Phantom, and it just does everything. So.
Yeah,
in a
way, they really do everything. One of my one of my whoa moments was when was it Don Airy or was it I think it was Don Airy who said that he played all the bass parts on a Judas Priest album because Ian Hill wasn't there, and it was just like, you did what? Don't do that. You can't do that.
Yeah,
they do everything.
Right. Yeah. And that's the cool thing now about songwriting, and you have a couple of those synths on a computer, you can emulate anything, orchestras. You can get a little app. Now, I love PPGs and stuff, and now it's an app. It's a little app. You just pull it up, and there it all is. So it's incredibly crazy. I wouldn't like to be trying to be a synth player these days, because where do you start?
Yeah, there's too much.
When I started, there was two choices. There was a little Yamaha or a little Korg, and now it's like everything is out there. Where do you start?
I don't know. The keyboard player for Dream Theater, Jordan Rudess, he's got a whole bunch of apps that are just so really cool where you can make, anyway, stuff to check out. String Theory, folks, coming out soon. And on that, Mike, merci. Always a pleasure. We've done this for 15 years now, I guess. It's always a pleasure.
Is it really 15 years?
15 or 20, yeah. I mean, it's been, I'm trying to think. I was doing a thing called the Mitch Minute at Magic 100 in Ottawa, and that must have been 2003, 2004. Wow. So it's been a long time.
I've forgotten those years ever existed.
Well, yeah, now we have to worry about the New Year's, and of course, String Theory out soon. I will post and tweet out the links, and merci. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Great. Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Great. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.